Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant to do something a little different and try doing a Star Trek versus Star Wars matchup in a more narrative format rather than my usual 8-part breakdown style, though still incorporating what I know and what I've learned over all the time I've been making this kind of stuff. Also, I have links to my coffee and Fourth Wall merch store in the description if you want to support the channel. This is coming on the heels of doing a few response videos to scenarios presented by primarily Eckhart's Ladder and Generation Tech, and I do a little bit of fiction writing myself, so why not tell a little story like they tend to do? So here's the setup. Towards the end of the Dominion War, Q gets bored and decides to make life in the universe more entertaining for himself, so he snaps his fingers and blam! The whole United Federation of planets, complete with territory and ships, is transported into the unknown regions of the Star Wars galaxy. This huge shift is accompanied by a massive disturbance in the Force, which both Darth Vader and Palpatine sense, having just defeated the rebellion at the Battle of Endor, and finished construction of the second Death Star. Having brought order and peace to their empire, Palpatine sends his apprentice to investigate the disturbance with an expeditionary fleet of 12 Star Destroyers, plus the Executor Star Destroyer with Vader himself in charge. It'll help take his mind off the fact that he was forced to take the life of his son Luke. Meanwhile, the whole Federation is in shock, having been transplanted to a strange new galaxy, and they begin gathering information immediately on local systems as fast as possible using their wartime fleet and their various observation posts. This far out from the galactic core, there is no Imperial presence, the whole area being unknown after all, but very quickly the Federation makes first contact with a variety of alien races that call this region of space home. Like with Voyager in the Delta Quadrant, the native species are absolutely fascinated with this post-scarcity society which can conjure food and materials out of thin air, can transport directly onto planets without the need for shuttles, and can even create holograms that are totally indistinguishable from the real thing, including touching you. The Federation, meanwhile, is astounded to learn that nobody in this galaxy is warp capable. They're something better. Hyperspace capable. It's clear that obtaining this technology is absolutely essential if they ever want to see the Milky Way galaxy again, as traveling home at even the highest warp factors would take thousands of years going between galaxies. This hyperdrive technology, on the other hand, is on par or perhaps even faster than the long-coveted Borg transwarp, and better yet, is such a common technology in this galaxy that you can just pick up a hyperdrive from a junkyard or derelict ship, plug it into your own ship, and it just works. Thank you, Todd Howard. Starfleet gets to work modifying every ship in the fleet with new hyperdrives, plugging them in without having to make a bunch of architectural changes to their ships. They don't have to add new nacelles, anything like that, and they end up with a massive leap forward in maximum faster-than-light travel speed. Fortunately, the local species are only too happy to trade hyperdrives for replicators and holoprojectors, though the Federation rejects all attempts to trade for their weapons technology or transporters. Those are too easy weaponizable, and the Federation doesn't like providing weapons to anyone, basically. At this point, Vader and his expeditionary fleet have worked their way through the unpredictable hyperspace lanes and unexplored space between the Galactic Empire and what is now Federation space, and in the galactic easternmost portion of the Federation, where what used to be the Romulan neutral zone is located, first contact is finally made. Vader and his fleet come across a lone Galaxy-class vessel which is exploring this new border area. It's moving at a relative snail's pace, having not yet received a new hyperdrive. The Imperial sensors don't detect any traditional weapons on this strange saucer-shaped vessel, though they can see that it's capable of wielding extraordinary amounts of power, given it isn't even half the size of an Imperial 2 Star Destroyer. The Federation ship, seeing this fleet of newcomers, which are obviously bristling with weapons, giant turrets and all, raises its shields and goes to yellow alert as a precaution, and then hails the largest ship, while keeping its distance. Vader himself answers and is unimpressed by the Federation's captain's platitudes about peace and exploration and friendship. These people exist outside of the Force, and to his supernatural senses, they just feel wrong. Unlike the legendary Yuzhan Vong from Legends, he can indeed sense them, but they're unnatural. And after all, they're invaders in his galaxy. He orders the Executor's tractor beams to pull the Federation ship into its hangar. The ship is far too distant for turbolasers to be effective, but the tractor beam has a much longer reach. It'd be a shame to damage this prize in his pointless fight anyway, and it doesn't have any turbolasers after all. The Galaxy-class shakes as the Imperial tractor beam begins drawing it in. The captain orders phasers to lock onto the tractor beam emitter and destroy it. A phaser beam gathers along the ship's emitter strip and fires, striking the tractor beam emitter from 100,000 kilometers away. Admiral Piet, in command of the Executor, had not actually ordered shields raised yet because there was no reason to. No weapon short of the Death Star super laser could strike at such distance, and certainly not so precisely. The phaser beam punches a hole clean through the Super Star Destroyer, causing massive damage to the ship, though not enough to cripple it. Admiral Piet belatedly orders shields raised on his now perforated ship, while rubbing his throat in anticipation of Vader's wrath. Fortunately, though, no follow-up shots are fired. Back on the Federation ship, everyone is shocked by the amount of damage caused by such a simple retaliation. Not being threatened by the Imperial ships and not interested in massacring a ton of newly encountered humanoid aliens just because they were rude and locked on a tractor beam, the Federation ship maintains its distance from the Imperial fleet. They reestablish communications with Darth Vader aboard the Executor and angrily confront him about his capture attempt. Vader carries his own share of wrath, and more than ever now wants to claim his prize that was capable of so easily damaging his ship and from such a distance. He reaches out through the Force, attempting a mind trick to get the Federation captain to order his ship closer, but is unable to push past the strong will of the captain. Starfleet doesn't put the weak-willed or weak-minded in charge of their ships. Failing the mind trick, he lashes out through the Force at the Federation captain and begins to choke the life from the man. The first officer sees his captain begin to choke and, in a panic, orders his ship to go to warp, heading back into Federation territory. The Galaxy-class turns in place and jumps to warp, breaking Vader's hold upon its captain. Despite warp being glacially slow compared to hyperdrives, Imperial sensors aren't actually capable of tracking faster-than-light objects effectively. That won't happen until the First Order develops it much later, so they're unable to track or pursue the Federation vessel, despite being able to outrun them. The initial encounter over, both sides review every bit of sensor information they have. Having seen phasers in action, the Empire is now aware of their range and power, and want to look for that on subsequent encounters. Phaser emitter strips are subtle in appearance compared to turbolaser turrets, but are incredibly deadly in application. It's unknown so far how effective they'd be against heavy Imperial shielding, since the shields weren't up, but against Imperial armor they can cut like a hot knife through butter. Vader contacts the Emperor and tells of the encounter, requesting additional support. Getting a hold of this technology would be a top priority for the Empire, but doing so will be difficult. On the Federation side, they didn't get a taste of the Imperial weaponry, nor did they get to see their shields or fighters in action, but they did get to see the incredible effective range of their tractor beams, and their scans paint a clear picture of what the Imperial ships can do. They're only using a form of particle beam akin to plasma cannons, technology that was antiquated 100 years ago and which suffers from severe range and accuracy limitations, but each ship carries so many of the weapons that they could do significant damage if allowed to get too close. Each ship also carries plenty of ion cannons, which shouldn't cause too much trouble since the whole fleet was upgraded to counter the Breen EMP weapons, and each ship also has a sizable hangar on their belly. The encounter didn't last long enough to get much more information about numbers of fighters or crew complement or anything like that, but it's enough to know that this is a militaristic and aggressive faction that should not be taken lightly. The Federation ship sends a message via subspace warning of the danger. The Emperor is intrigued by the story that Darth Vader tells and is only too eager to send an additional 1,000 Star Destroyers, as well as the second Death Star, to secure this high-tech prize. With these new beam weapons under his control, he would be absolutely unstoppable. Thanks to their extraordinary fast hyperdrives, the Empire is able to rapidly deploy this new fleet, in support of the Death Star, to the galactic east side of the Federation's territory, though it will still take some time for them to arrive. Meanwhile, Vader and his dozen ships plus the Executor go ahead and raid one of the more remote colonies. The colonists are totally defenseless, and, while they're able to take out a few stormtroopers with their handheld phasers, almost all of them are captured, as is every last bit of technology at the colony, including a single transporter, the aforementioned hand phasers, and a few food replicators. The colony was powered by a simple fusion reactor, but this is no interest to the Empire with their hypermatter reactors, so they just destroy it along with the rest of the colony before moving on. They do not destroy the planet, however. There's no need to show their hand just yet, and the Death Star hasn't showed up, so the fleet that they have would take a bit. Harnessing this Federation tech proves to be difficult. The first attempt involves plugging a food replicator straight into a Star Destroyer's power grid, and, like the Kazon before them, they quickly discover the difficulty of trying to integrate incompatible power systems with Federation tech, as the replicator violently explodes, crippling the Star Destroyer and prompting Vader to load it up with the rest of the stolen technology and send them back to the Ma research facility so that Imperial engineers can take everything apart and learn what they can in a more controlled environment. Actually, reverse engineering any of this technology will take years, as even the underlying physics are far beyond anything that the Imperials have ever seen, and the engineers among the captured colonists only know how to repair the devices, not create them from scratch. They are not inventors, and they're not even that high of a caliber of engineers. Those tend to work for Starfleet. Back at Starfleet Command, news of this highly aggressive Galactic Empire has the Admiralty abuzz with concern. They immediately dispatch a fleet of 50 ships, all with newly acquired hyperdrives to the former Romulan neutral zone. They direct more resources toward refitting everything they can with hyperdrives, being keenly aware of their severe mobility disadvantage. The fact that the Empire is coming through the neutral zone actually gives the admirals a great idea. The peace treaty with the Romulans barring the Federation from developing or using cloaking technology only applies to the Milky Way galaxy. They immediately push to develop and integrate cloaking devices into everything that they can, and given their decades of experience in countering and having to counter the technology, the initial versions will be available within a month. They even resurrect research into the phasing technology, which doomed Commander Riker's former ship, the Pegasus, which allowed equipped ships to pass through solid matter totally unaffected. With this new galaxy to explore, all bets are off regarding interstellar treaties restricting technology. Back near the Romulan neutral zone, Vader divides his fleet and begins hitting planet after planet after planet. He's now even supported by the Death Star, so he's able to coordinate everything from there. He starts destroying colonies, looting technology, and capturing the colonists. What few ships they encounter don't even try resisting and simply warp away when faced with the fearsome and gigantic Imperial ships. These aren't Starfleet ships helmed by suicidally curious captains, desperate to seek out new life and new civilizations. These are just border world colonists who have no interest in fighting anyone. This all changes when Vader attacks Denobula, the homeworld of the Denobulans, as you might remember Dr. Phlox from Star Trek Enterprise. They're an important species to the Federation, whose planet also happens to be relatively close to Earth. Here, the Federation is finally able to actually mount a defense, but still only has those 50 ships, plus anything that the Denobulians can muster, against 50 Star Destroyers, the Executor, and the second Death Star. This is the first time Starfleet has observed the Death Star, and initial scans reveal much about its awesome power that it wields. They form a defensive perimeter between the Imperial fleet and the planet and hail the Executor. Vader provides a simple ultimatum: surrender all ships and technology, or be destroyed. Starfleet refuses. As a demonstration of force, Vader orders a low-power shot from the Death Star superlaser against one of the Galaxy-class vessels opposing his fleet, as it reminds him of the one that damaged his precious Executor and cost him the life of Admiral Piet, who couldn't be allowed to live after not raising the shields. The shot obliterates the Federation vessel and continues on through, punching straight through Denobula's planet shielding and obliterating a city on its surface. This will be a rallying cry for the remainder of the war. Starfleet does not surrender, and it remembers those who inflict scars upon it. Every one of the Federation ships, Starfleet and Denobulan alike, lock phasers and fire away. This time the Imperial fleet actually has its shields up in anticipation of the attack, but each phaser shot combines the power of dozens of turbolaser shots into a single point, and even the mighty Star Destroyer shields can't hold up long against such punishment. They launch all their fighters and bombers, filling space with thousands of ties, but while attempting to close the gap and actually get in weapons range, they begin drifting aimlessly and colliding with each other as their pilots are just beamed away since the fighters are unshielded. The fact that Federation ships can't transport with their own shields raised is a non-issue so far, since nothing but the Death Star can actually harm them at this distance, and the slow crawl of the Star Destroyers towards them is giving them plenty of time to transport away. Any that get too close are just easily pecked off by rapid-fire low-power phaser shots. They're unshielded, so destroying them doesn't take much, and phasers are incredibly precise and accurate, so yeah, TIE fighters and bombers, they're relatively nimble, but they're not that nimble. Speaking of the Death Star, that is obviously the biggest threat, and the Denobulan ships in particular want vengeance upon the gigantic station that scarred their beautiful homeworld. Hundreds of photon and quantum torpedoes streak toward the super laser focusing dish. It takes several minutes for the Death Star to be able to fire again, even at such low power, so all they can do is just sit and watch as the torpedoes punch through the Death Star's armor and engulf the super laser in a combination of fissile and zero-point energy nuclear fire. Author's note here: it's unclear if either Death Star was actually shielded at all beyond magnetic shields, which provide no real protection beyond just retaining atmosphere. You get to hear about the magnetic shield in A New Hope when they were approaching, they were passing through the magnetic shield. The second Death Star definitely had particle shields, as the shields needed to be dropped for ships to be able to approach, but those shields originated from Endor, not from the station itself. The first Death Star couldn't have been particle shielded, or none of the fighters would have actually got close to the thing. And in terms of energy shielding for either station, the only energy shield we hear about at all was the ray shielding over the exhaust port, which is why it necessitated using proton torpedoes. Anyway, all that said, I am quite comfortable assuming that any shielding that the second Death Star has in this encounter would be totally incapable of stopping torpedoes. Alright, on with the show. The Death Star super laser now inoperative, Vader orders the station to withdraw for repairs. Its job is done. It continues taking surface damage as it performs the complex calculations for a jump to hyperspace, but before long the intensity of the attack lessens as the Imperial fleet is finally closed to weapons range with the Federation ships, who have their maneuvers limited by the fact that they're attempting to stay between the Imperials and the planet. Vader also contacts the other elements of Invasion fleet and calls for reinforcements. He did only start with 50 ships in this encounter. Within minutes, dozens and then hundreds more Star Destroyers join the fight from neighboring systems. Turbolasers might be primitive by Federation standards, but get a few thousand of them together alongside a few thousand ion cannons and the Starfleet vessels begin having their shields hammered down. Fortunately for them, even when their shields begin failing, their armor is able to resist turbolaser fire extraordinarily effectively. Ship hulls and structural integrity fields are designed to be able to sit in close proximity to stars and heat into tens of thousands of degrees without deforming, so the nearly purely thermal damage of turbolasers is not exactly optimized for defeating such defenses. Still though, the combined fire of the initial fleet combined with the fresh ships constantly jumping in begin whittling away at the Starfleet forces, despite the fact that their accuracy is abysmal. Starfleet weapons are proving far more effective, and with the Death Star superlaser disabled, now all ships are directing their torpedoes at the enemy fleet instead. It doesn't take long to figure out that the belly of any Star Destroyer with a hangar is relatively poorly protected, and that there are munitions and fuel stores within those hangars, so word spreads to program all torpedoes to strike Star Destroyer targets in the belly. Hundreds of photon and quantum torpedoes follow winding paths from their host ships to the bellies of Star Destroyers. The weakest of these are antimatter warheads, which detonate in nuclear fire, augmented further by the aforementioned fuel and weapon stores. The quantum torpedoes, on the other hand, utilize zero-point energy, which you might know from Stargate, and unleash the power of multiple photon torpedoes apiece. Each of these is capable of crippling a Star Destroyer by itself if it strikes either the hangar or engines, but less ships in the Federation fleet have them available. Star Destroyers, which have already sustained heavy damage from sustained phaser fire, are gutted by the combination of torpedoes and their own detonating innards. Vader can easily see that there is no winning this fight, no matter how many ships he commits. Even if every Starfleet vessel is destroyed, the cost of the fight would still amount to just a loss for his side. So he commands a retreat. This time, they will have to withdraw to shipyards in friendly space to make repairs and attempt to adapt their defenses and weapons. The Death Star, the Executor Super Star Destroyer, and a couple hundred Star Destroyers manage to escape. The rest are either destroyed outright or crippled to the point that they can't get away anymore. Still more never arrive to help and are redirected to continue their raids against less defended targets. The ships that remain have their crews beamed directly into Starfleet cargo bays converted into holding pens, their weapons and armor removed in transit, and the ships are captured. The Federation fleet suffers relatively minimal losses beyond the first ship, which was just lost with all hands. There are a few ships that have been crippled to the point of needing to either be retired or have a massive refit, but losses are relatively minimal. Now the fun begins for Starfleet engineers. They have unfettered access to a wealth of new technology, including near-sentient droids, all protected by laughably bad cybersecurity that provides things like strategic information regarding illegal political prisoners to what amounts to an air traffic control tower. Cough, cough, A New Hope. Unfortunately, most of the technology is quaint and interesting, but useless. Federation technology far eclipsed this over a century ago. The droids are interesting, but baffling. Why would you dedicate so much processing power to a personality on a robot that basically operates as a battery with legs? What aren't useless are the star charts. This galactic empire is absolutely gigantic, including thousands of systems, millions of worlds, quadrillions of people, and an incredible array of species. The historical archives are also fascinating, deep history stretching back millennia, and featuring tales of an ancient, now extinct order of supernaturally powerful wielders of something called the Force, which bestows the combined powers of multiple Federation species like Betazoids and Vulcans, and more upon certain rare individuals. This might explain the power of that Vader character that they encountered during the First Contact fiasco. While hunting through the technical capabilities of a captured ship, engineers discovered that there are a lot of resources dedicated to still transmitting jamming signals. Unfortunately for the Empire, none of the frequencies being jammed are ones that Federation uses for their sensors, and certainly not with the power needed to block out the ultra-powerful and high-resolution sensors equipped on all Starfleet vessels. The contents of the computer cores on all captured vessels are quickly downloaded and transmitted to Starfleet Command for analysis. Back on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine is enraged by the utter failure of his apprentice, and further enraged that he didn't have the decency to die and rid Palpatine of this mechanical monstrosity who has failed time and time again to live up to expectations. From losing his limbs to Obi-Wan Kenobi, to the loss of the first Death Star, to his failure to turn Luke to the dark side, and now the loss of a whole fleet, and crippling of the second Death Star. A worthy successor he has not been. And to make matters worse, now this Federation has undoubtedly captured an Imperial vessel or two, and will be able to use the information that provides to go on the offensive. He's absolutely correct to have this fear. Starfleet Command spends the next few weeks outfitting every ship that they can with hyperdrives, and within a month have assembled a fleet of 100 ships to go from shipyard to shipyard, destroying the Empire's ability to wage war before taking the fight to Coruscant itself. Palpatine has other ideas. He knows now that his massive fleet cannot defeat this Federation in battle, so they'll have to break their spirit instead. He orders that all ships in the initial invasion fleet begin jumping from planet to planet, indiscriminately bombarding all targets before jumping away before defenders could arrive. Within the month, Starfleet takes to assemble its own counteroffensive. Dozens of worlds are attacked, and their colonies are destroyed, while the Imperial ships are able to just get in and out before any help can arrive. Pressure begins to mount to sue for peace and stop the bloodshed. But calmer heads prevail. Starfleet Command and the Federation Council have seen that this is not merely a war for territory or technology, but survival. Surrender is out of the question. Peace might be an option, but the raiding strategy the Empire is employing makes discussing anything impossible. Plus, the histories that they found in the data cores of the captured ships tell a tale of absolutely no chance of a mutually beneficial peace occurring. Counteroffensive is the only option, and thanks to the captured navicomputers from the Battle of Denobula, Starfleet knows exactly where to strike. To try and staunch the bleeding, as it were, Starfleet deploys every available ship to any Federation world with more than a minimal colonial presence, leaving all home worlds to defend themselves, since they already have their own non-Starfleet vessels, which are more than capable of handling themselves. Fringe colonies continue to be lost to the Imperial raids, though there are evacuation attempts made. But all contested encounters go very badly for the Empire, as they are immediately outranged, outgunned, and outmaneuvered by the far technologically superior Federation ships. Finally, the counteroffensive task force is ready. They're led by the Sovereign-class Enterprise E under the command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, which has been repaired after its encounter with the Riemann Warbird Scimitar. All 100 ships in this task force are equipped with adapted hyperdrives and rudimentary cloaking devices. The cloaks aren't on the level of those on the Scimitar, which allowed it to fire while cloaked, and they emanate more tachyon radiation than would be ideal, but they should provide a tactical advantage nonetheless. The order is given, and the task force heads straight for the shipyards at Kuat. Within days, thanks to the new hyperdrives, they arrive and are greeted by hundreds of Star Destroyers, both those which are under construction and being repaired, and those which are permanently stationed for defense. The battle still doesn't take very long. Having had plenty of time to analyze Imperial ships both from battle scans and from those that were captured, it is a simple matter to destroy the giant obvious shield generator domes over the bridge of each Star Destroyer before obliterating them with combined phaser and torpedo fire. None of the Imperial ships are able to get in range to use their own weapons and retaliate, as the Federation phasers and torpedoes have more than 100 times their effective range. The shipyard itself is no trouble either. A few well-placed tricobalt devices are plenty to shatter the ring-shaped facility and send huge chunks crashing into the planet below, causing untold damage to the cities. Had the Imperials resisted the indiscriminate total war tactics they'd been employing this whole time, destroying any and all colonies they encounter, perhaps Picard would have ordered much more care to be taken to not endanger the local populace, but they've all been pushed far too far. If the Empire wants widespread destruction, they'll get it. The same story is repeated at the Corellian, Fondor, and Mon Calamari shipyards with all similar results. At least at the Mon Calamari shipyards, more ship varieties encountered, but the battles are still short and bloody. The Starfleet mission here isn't to break the Imperial will to fight, rather it is to remove their ability to fight. Palpatine is further angered by the losses of his precious shipyards and orders that everything should be thrown at the Federation. Zeiston-class Star Destroyers are deployed from Exegol, and the Sun Crusher is deployed from the Maw installation. Now the Federation is confronted by the true horror of what the Empire is willing and able to do as multiple planets are lost to the Zeiston-class ships before they can be destroyed themselves. The Sun Crusher is an odd situation, since it becomes apparent right away that even phasers and torpedoes are just incapable of damaging the tiny ship, but it also has no shields and is about the size of a large shuttle. So in its first attempt at destroying a star, the pilot is just beamed away, followed by the Sun Crusher itself being tractor-beamed and pulled into a shuttle bay for analysis. This quantum armor could be a massive improvement over standard tritanium armor. Back in Imperial space, Picard has been contacted by the Emperor himself, and while he tries to negotiate an end to the bloodshed, Palpatine is just totally disinterested in such an idea. Picard sends a ship back to Earth with the bad news, and the Admiralty at Starfleet Command make a difficult decision. As has happened before throughout history, a demonstration of absolute power is needed that cannot be ignored. They send the Defiant, under what would have been the command of Captain Sisko if he weren't busy being the emissary, but is instead under the command of Commander Worf with a special mission. Under cloak, and traveling through hyperspace with their newly installed hyperdrive, the Defiant travels to Coruscant and deploys a weapon developed by a madman who is willing to sacrifice billions of lives for the chance to return to heaven. They decloak for only a few seconds and fire a single torpedo at Coruscant's home star before turning and jumping to warp. The crew only gets to watch in horror as the trilithium torpedo causes the star to go nova, obliterating Coruscant, Palpatine, and most of his bureaucrats, along with over 1 trillion other Imperial citizens, be they civilian or military. Darth Vader aboard the Executor, which has been repaired enough to participate in raids, is brought to his knees by the disturbance in the Force that is the death of his master and so many others. He takes a few seconds to gather himself, and then orders a retreat back to Imperial space. Vader is aggressive and cruel, but he is no fool. He knows that continuing this fight will cost him everything. Again, he sues for peace. He can be patient. Imperial engineers at the still-secret Maw installation have plenty of samples of Federation technology to allow them to reverse engineer it. When they can adapt such technology to Imperial purposes, then they can attempt again. For now, there is much work to be done. The Federation is more than happy to have peace with the Empire. They impose certain sanctions, including requiring that the Empire to submit to having a permanent task force of Starfleet vessels patrolling their space, ensuring that no significant buildup of ship occurs, but beyond that, they simply don't have the manpower or will to impose anything more strict. This war has cost more worlds and lives than the wars with the Romulans, Klingons, Borg, and Dominion combined. With multiple planets destroyed, there isn't even much rebuilding to be done beyond the colonies that just got orbitally bombarded. It's not all bad, though. Hyperdrive technology is revolutionary for both shipping and exploration, opening up a whole new galaxy to see and learn about to everyone. And the semi-sentient droids, so common in the Empire, are quickly employed to help with rebuilding and to increase industrialization to keep pace with the production capabilities of their dangerous neighbors. And the droids themselves are only too happy to work for the Federation, which actually treats them as individuals and as people as opposed to just objects to be disposed of like the Empire does. And with that, we'll end it there. But first, I want to explain a lot of my rationale for having things play out this way. 99% of this matchup is that the technology gap between the Empire and Federation is so vast that the Empire would never win a single space combat scenario. If they don't win in space, they don't get to deploy their vast armies of stormtroopers and armored walkers, so none of that really matters much. What they can do is get around quickly and cause a lot of damage very quickly. which I hope I've done a decent job of representing. The single best strategy for the Empire would be to go from world to world, thrashing them from orbit before leaving before help can arrive, which, with a huge difference in speed between standard warp drive and hyperdrives, they'd be able to do just fine for a while. The problem would arise when any one of those attacks are contested, because again, they would never win a space battle. As far as my decision to allow the Federation fairly early acquisition of hyperdrives, which, if you've watched my 8-part matchup series, is not something I allowed for the comparison, the reason is that this is more of a narrative scenario, with the whole Federation space being plopped down in the unknown regions of the Star Wars galaxy. Everyone in the Star Wars galaxy who has access to faster-than-light travel uses hyperdrives, and have for thousands of years. The Federation is populated by a bunch of curious busybodies who love meeting new people and learning new things, so one of the very first things they do is meet the neighbors, learn about hyperdrives, and want them. The locals, who've, again, had hyperdrives for literally thousands of years and don't think much of them, would see the Federation tech like being able to conjure food and material out of nothing through replicators and be very interested in trading. I mean, really, who wouldn't trade somewhat faster ships for the ability to want for nothing forever? Adapting hyperdrive tech into tracked ships, I think, would be pretty simple. Again, this is thousands of year old technology, and it can be demonstrably taken out of a junkyard, dragged through a desert, and then socketed into a ship with no apparent specialized engines beyond those used for sublight travel, and they just work. We've seen time and time again across the series, Federation engineers able to integrate all sorts of new and amazing technologies into their ships in a matter of hours. So I don't think them being able to integrate hyperdrives is such a stretch at all. Finally, why can't the Imperials do the exact same thing as easily? Well, I do think that the Imperials would be able to adapt Federation technology, but it would take time and fundamentally redesigning their ships. Want to use a warp drive? Okay, you need a warp core and nacelles, which dictate the shape of your ship, and you have to scale according to the size of said ship, and then you get a mode of faster-than-light travel that is far slower than what you already have, even if it is more flexible. Okay, how about replicators? Well, the Kazon, who had the help of a Cardassian engineer, already used warp drive and a type of phaser, attempted to steal a replicator and integrate the tech, but did so wrong it blew their own ship up. So they had similar technology, a similar foundation, similar science, and it still blew up in their face. Considering that the Imperials missed a fatal design flaw in the first Death Star that was so subtle that nobody caught it, but so obvious that the rebels were able to find it within hours of getting the plans, I'm not confident that learning to integrate such technology would happen all that quick. The same goes for phasers. Okay, great, you managed to install a bunch of phaser emitters. Well, did you install the improved sensors too? No? Okay, great. You have improved weapons, but still can't hit anything. By comparison, just taking a hyperdrive and slapping it engineering and giving it power is way easier. No ship architecture design, no inherent volatility, and it's one technology to cover the Federation's biggest weakness in this matchup, not 10 technologies. But what do you think? Are there other factors that you think would make a big difference in this scenario? Do you think I'm being as fair as I can be, or, as I've been accused a few times at this point, am I, in fact, a massive Star Trek shill who just ignores everything the Imperials can do so that my favorite side can win? I promise I don't actually care who wins. I care about figuring out who wins. But take that or leave it as you will. Again, I have a coffee and fourth wall merch or links in the description below, and until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.